What if the fate of tens of thousands rested on the capture of a single individual? Picture a war in which victory does not depend on overwhelming numbers, but on the removal of one irreplaceable mind. Imagine a battlefield frozen in stalemate, until one figure's absence could shatter the balance. Throughout history, the notion that a single person could change the tide of war has echoed across centuries. Consider the legendary capture of Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal during the Second Punic War. The loss of this single commander, caught and killed before he could reinforce his brother, proved pivotal. The Roman victory at the Metaurus shifted the momentum of the entire conflict. Now, centuries later, a similar dynamic unfolds with General Michael Cross, a name whispered with both dread and respect. General Cross was more than a commander. He was the enemy's living nerve center, the architect whose vision held their entire defensive line together. Every day, his presence turned chaos into order, his instincts transforming defeat into resilience. It was his unpredictable tactics and unwavering resolve that stymied every advance. His troops, battered and weary, would find strength in his leadership. Under his gaze, exhausted soldiers rediscovered discipline and hope. Stories circulated among the ranks. How Cross would appear at the direst moment, rallying a faltering line with a few words, or personally patching up wounded men to keep them in the fight. His leadership radiated through the ranks, turning ordinary soldiers into a force that simply would not break. It was as if his spirit, indomitable and sharp, stitched together the fabric of resistance. Opposing analysts quickly saw a harsh truth. As long as Cross remained, every new assault risked a bloodbath without progress. He was not just a chess piece, but the player moving the pieces. The stakes could not be higher. Capturing Cross might end the deadlock overnight, saving untold lives and shifting the momentum of war with a single surgical blow. But the risks were equally daunting. Fail, and the cost would be measured not just in lost soldiers, but in shattered morale and squandered opportunity. Throughout military history, such gambles have been rare and fraught with peril. Why was Cross more than just a name on a strategic map? What made him the beating heart of resistance, the keystone holding an entire front together? To answer that, we must step inside his command, where innovation and nerve became the final bulwarks against collapse. To understand Cross's influence, we must explore how his unique leadership redefined the battlefield. Let's examine the choices that made him indispensable, and the vulnerabilities that others sought to exploit. Leadership means power, but power can also be a critical vulnerability. In the annals of strategy, the fall of such figures has often spelled disaster for their followers. During the Napoleonic Wars, for example, the loss of Marshal Lannes at Aspern-Essling stunned French forces. His absence left a vacuum that could not be filled, and the French suffered accordingly. General Michael Cross was not merely another officer in the enemy's ranks. He was the architect who rejected standard doctrine, embracing unpredictable asymmetric strategies that left his adversaries constantly unsettled. Instead of following set-piece maneuvers, Cross would improvise, using deception, feints, and psychological warfare to keep his enemies guessing. Under his vision, the enemy's chaotic retreat solidified into a resilient, multi-layered defense, holding firm even when defeat seemed certain. He drew inspiration from history, studying how commanders like Erwin Rommel or von Nguyen-Giap leveraged mobility and surprise to compensate for inferior numbers. Cross was relentless, personally orchestrating both logistics and battlefield maneuvers down to the finest detail. He would reroute supply convoys through mountain passes at night, repurpose armored vehicles for unexpected tasks, and order sudden counterattacks when least expected. His influence could be traced everywhere: repurposed armored vehicles, hidden supply lines, and battlefield feints that defied conventional logic. He was not simply a commander. He became the nerve center and driving force of the entire resistance. Yet such brilliance came at a cost. Cross ran an intensely centralized operation, with nearly every meaningful decision routed directly through him. His presence galvanized his troops, but it also bound the entire defense to his singular perspective. Russian analysts saw the fatal flaw. If Cross were removed, the enemy's structure would not just weaken, it would unravel completely. This is reminiscent of the fall of Frederick the Great's trusted generals, whose deaths in battle often left Prussian lines vulnerable and confused. The stakes were nothing less than existential. The entire defensive apparatus depended on Cross's unique oversight. His loss would shatter their coordination overnight. But reaching a target so vital, shielded by layers of secrecy and protection, was a challenge of the highest order. How do you hunt a leader who moves like a shadow and whose survival is the enemy's lifeline? The challenge was akin to the Allies' search for Erwin Rommel in North Africa, an elusive adversary who always seemed one step ahead. To strike at the heart of the enemy, simply finding Cross was not enough. The operation would demand cunning, patience, and flawless timing. To ensnare the mastermind, it required a masterstroke, not brute force, but razor-edged intelligence. General Michael Cross was legendary for his caution and unpredictability. His communications were shielded by layers of American encryption, forming a digital fortress. Direct cyber attacks were futile. His channels simply could not be breached the conventional way. So, the analysts changed their approach. Instead of attacking the messages themselves, they hunted in the shadows, metadata, irregular radio pulses, and the subtle fingerprints of human routine. They listened day and night, scanning for Cross's signature, a rare, orbital data burst, unique to his command style and absent from ordinary military chatter. Still, the digital veil held. The breakthrough came from a softer, more human angle. Cross's adjutant, confident in the security of his private messenger, dropped a single careless complaint to his fiancée. The general's favorite Irish whiskey had arrived late. The detail was minor. The clue was not. The shipment, he said, had come by hand from the west, bound straight for the new hideout. This kind of seemingly trivial detail has swayed many operations. During the Second World War, the Allies famously used laundry deliveries and other mundane routines to pinpoint the schedules and locations of German officers. That slip shattered the puzzle. By cross-matching radio anomalies with the rare whiskey's delivery logs, analysts traced the trail to a single, unlikely spot: a deserted sanatorium in the Carpathian foothills. Within 2 days, satellite eyes caught a nondescript van at the gates. Moments later, the telltale radio burst flickered to life. Probability was not certainty. Human boots were needed. Undercover agents took their places. A local woodsman ghosted through the forest, charting patrols and cameras. A delivery worker embedded in the supply chain gathered whispers from inside. Each, unaware of the other, confirmed the same. Heavy food orders, cryptic supply lists, silent guards who watched everything but spoke to no one. The signs all pointed to a high command outpost. The time came for the final gambit. To force Cross into the open, the team engineered a forest fire nearby. As smoke rolled in and alarms sounded, a hidden camera caught what they had hoped for: the general himself, unmistakable, emerging for a tense inspection. Every step was perilous. A single miscalculation could have blown the entire operation, leading to months of work erased, or worse, a fatal reprisal. But with Cross's presence now beyond question, the stakes soared. Was this the narrow window to strike and end the war's brain, or, daring fate, to seize the mastermind alive? With Cross's position exposed, every agency raced against time. The decision now would shape not only this battle, but the entire course of the war. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is the one you cannot ignore. Faced with General Michael Cross, a mastermind whose capture could tilt the entire war, commanders confronted a brutal dilemma: unleash a missile strike and erase him, or risk everything on a close-quarters raid to seize him alive. A strike promised safety, but it would burn away every secret, every coded plan, every whisper he had squirreled away. But Cross's mind was a vault of enemy strategies, future operations, and the subtle levers that kept their entire command intact. His live capture would deliver a psychological earthquake, shaking the enemy's confidence and sending shockwaves through their ranks. The stakes were nothing less than the unraveling of the opposition's command structure, or the loss of a priceless chance. To tip the scales, 36 elite operatives were selected, their skills honed by years of shadow warfare. They split into 3 units, one to breach, one to provide cover, and one to guarantee extraction. Every movement was mapped, every escape rehearsed, because failure here would not just cost lives, it would hand the enemy a propaganda victory to last a generation. The approach began just after midnight. The team slipped through a labyrinth of forest, bypassing mines and sensors using encrypted comms and night vision. Each sentry was neutralized with non-lethal force, no alarms raised. The assault team moved like shadows, bursting into the compound and catching Cross's staff paralyzed with shock. In those frantic minutes, they seized not only Cross, but also stacks of encrypted files and digital devices, raw intelligence that could reveal the enemy's true intentions. The extraction was launched as sirens finally wailed and armed reinforcements converged in a fury of gunfire and confusion. Evacuation teetered on disaster. Smoke grenades cloaked their retreat as the cover team set carefully timed charges to create chaos among the defenders. Precision helicopter fire swept the perimeter, keeping casualties minimal. Against the odds, the entire unit, bloodied but together, lifted off into the night, carrying with them a living Cross and the keys to the enemy's secrets. The mission was a knife-edge gamble, but the prize was unprecedented. Not only had they secured the architect of enemy defenses, they had shattered morale across the opposition's command. Now, with Cross isolated and the trove in hand, a new front opened. Could he be made to reveal the truths that would decide the war's outcome? With Cross in custody, interrogators and analysts prepared for the next battle, a contest of intellect and will. The war's fate now hinged on what secrets he would surrender, and how quickly they could be turned against his former allies. Remove a keystone, and the entire arch crumbles. When General Michael Cross, the mastermind behind the enemy's defense, was finally captured, the effect was immediate and far-reaching. At first, Cross resisted. His reputation for unbreakable will was well earned. But brute force was not the weapon of choice. Instead, a combination of psychological pressure and irrefutable proof of his abandonment by high command wore him down, minute by minute. With Cross in custody, the true reward surfaced. Crucial intelligence, pried from him, revealed the enemy's blueprint for a massive offensive. Armed with this knowledge, our side struck first. What might have been a devastating defeat transformed, almost overnight, into a sweeping counteroffensive. Yet the real chaos began after Cross was removed from the board. His absence severed the nerve center of the entire command structure. The officers who replaced him, chosen in haste, lacked both his vision and his authority. Confusion spread, hesitation became contagious, and discipline started to erode. It was a domino effect in real time. Orders were delayed or ignored, units acted at cross purposes, and morale evaporated. The enemy's once formidable defense, seemingly indestructible only days before, now unraveled at breathtaking speed. The loss of one leader had triggered the collapse of an entire war machine. This operation lays bare an uncomfortable truth about leadership and power. Strike the right node, and even the strongest system can fail catastrophically. But it also exposes a danger, the brittle nature of over-centralized control. When everything hinges on one figure, the risk is not just tactical, but existential. The lesson? In high-stakes strategy, identifying and targeting the true center of gravity can change the entire game. But what happens if the wrong target is chosen? The aftermath of Cross's capture forced both sides to confront uncomfortable realities about their own vulnerabilities. It was a turning point, one that would echo far beyond the battlefield. Victory is rarely about sheer force. Far more often, it is about spotting and tipping the right domino, the one that brings the whole structure tumbling down. In every conflict, there is always a single point of leverage, a person, a process, or a decision on which everything else depends. True mastery is the art of discovering this center of gravity. When you find it, you commit all your resources to striking there, not everywhere, knowing that one precise push can accomplish what endless struggle cannot. This was the principle behind the capture of General Michael Cross. He was not merely a commander. He was the mind that orchestrated every defense, the unseen link holding together the enemy's fragmented command. Removing him did not just disrupt communication. It shattered the enemy's confidence, froze their chain of command, and unleashed a cascade of confusion that brute strength could never have achieved. But this lesson extends beyond battlefields. In war, in business, even in personal life, most people waste energy flailing at surface problems. They attack symptoms, not causes, pouring effort into fronts that, in the end, barely matter. Meanwhile, a single move at the true center can unlock victory with breathtaking speed. There is risk in this approach. If you misjudge the leverage point, you squander time and resources, and sometimes you never get a second chance. But if you identify it, a critical player, a vulnerable node, a hidden weak link, and act decisively, you can change the entire game in a single stroke. The core lesson is simple but ruthless. Always hunt for the system's center of gravity. Study every node, map every dependency, and ask yourself, what single action would cause the greatest ripple? When you find it, focus everything. Do not hesitate. Because sometimes, winning requires not greater effort, but sharper vision. This principle has shaped the course of history in countless arenas. In the world of business, think of the rivalry between Apple and Microsoft in the early days of personal computing. Both companies fought on many fronts, but Apple's ability to identify and dominate the market for intuitive design and user experience, its center of gravity, turned it into a global powerhouse. In sports, legendary coaches like Phil Jackson or Bill Belichick have built dynasties not by outspending their rivals, but by identifying the leverage points, whether in player psychology, team culture, or innovative tactics, that transform good teams into great ones. So, how can you develop this skill in your own life? It begins with disciplined observation. Start by mapping any system you face, your organization, your team, your daily routine. List every part, every player, every process. Then ask yourself, which link, if changed, would most dramatically alter the outcome? In warfare, this might mean targeting a supply depot rather than a frontline trench. In business, it could mean winning over a key decision-maker instead of expending energy on broad advertising. In relationships, it may be a single honest conversation that unlocks years of misunderstanding. Here are practical steps to sharpen your vision for leverage points. First, study the system. Draw diagrams, write lists, talk to insiders. Try to see the whole board, not just your piece. Second, look for bottlenecks. Those places where everything must pass, where a single delay or failure brings the entire process to a halt. In military history, this was famously demonstrated at Thermopylae, where a handful of Spartans held off a massive Persian army by controlling a narrow pass, the bottleneck that determined the outcome. Third, identify key influencers. Sometimes, as with General Cross, it is a person whose presence or absence changes everything. Other times, it is a process or a resource. During the Pacific Campaign of the Second World War, the U.S. Navy realized that Japanese oil tankers were far more vulnerable than battleships. By targeting fuel supplies, they crippled the Japanese fleet. Fourth, test your hypothesis. Make small, calculated moves to see where the system flexes or cracks. Observe the ripples. If you see disproportionate effects from a single change, you are close to the center of gravity. Fifth, act decisively. Once you are confident, do not hesitate. The window for leverage is often brief, just as the team had only a single chance to seize Cross before he vanished again. Commit and follow through with all available resources. And finally, learn and adapt. Sometimes, the first guess is wrong. Every setback is a map to the true center. Study the aftermath. interrogate your own assumptions, and refine your approach. The most successful strategists, from Sun Tzu to John Boyd, made adaptability their greatest weapon. Now, as we look beyond this victory, a greater challenge emerges. How do you train yourself to see these leverage points before anyone else does? The answer lies in relentless curiosity and disciplined practice. Study history, not just military, but business, science, and sports. Find the patterns where single decisions or individuals tip the scales. Practice mapping systems in your own life and challenge yourself to spot the hidden keystone. Remember, the world is full of noise and distraction. Most people are content to push harder rather than smarter. But those who master the art of leverage, who hunt the true center of gravity, shape outcomes far beyond their numbers. The capture of General Michael Cross was not merely a feat of military prowess. It was a masterclass in strategic vision, a lesson that, in every field, sometimes the fate of thousands or even millions can hinge on the right person, in the right place, at the right time. Will you be the one who sees it first?